Welcome to the $1 Billion Podcast, a weekly show about the entrepreneurial journey and making it big in any industry. We're your hosts, Joe White and Kane Daniel.
And today we have Patrick Soy with us. Patrick has nearly 2 decades of experience in this industry, the mortgage industry. He's earned a number of accolades in that time. In 2021, he was named Business Development Manager of the Year at the Mortgage Awards of Excellence. He's also been recognized as a top industry professional by Canadian Mortgage Professional. Patrick has a huge passion for sharing knowledge that extends to training thousands of mortgage professionals. He's actually currently an instructor at the Real Estate and Mortgage Institute of Canada and holds key roles as principal broker and executive vice president at Integrity Tree Financial. And he leads a team of over 20 agents and brokers there.
So welcome, Patrick. The first thing I have to ask you, this is a really important question. I see something on a counter behind you. It's a little blue guy.
Yeah.
What is that?
Funny enough, it was actually from an underwriter that I actually received when I used to work at a company called Resmore Trust back then. They kind of were creating little toys, and I always kind of kept it. I guess there's like a sentimental value, but as you move to different places, the pieces start to break. So there's some missing parts, but it's still there. The other missing parts,
fantastic.
time to glue it together. Yeah,
that's great. You know what? And that kind of speaks, I think, to your professionalism. Obviously, if you've gotten that from an underwriter, that's fantastic. I want to make sure that my daughter doesn't see that because she's going to be bugging me. It's really cute. So, tell us a bit about your story, your journey to get to where you are today, because you've been in the industry quite some time and you're really well known and respected. So tell me how you got from coming into the industry, where you were perhaps, and your journey so far.
Yep, most definitely. First and foremost, thanks for having me on your guys' episode here, your newly podcast. Obviously excited to kind of put things out there for newly agents that might be interested in joining the industry. A little bit of background about myself. So I'm originally born and raised in Calgary, Alberta. I had moved from Calgary to Toronto back probably about 11 years ago. But a son of immigrants, both my parents, they moved here in the late 70s. I started my kind of career in the mortgage journey right after kind of high school, around when I was 8 years of age. But I've always been working most of my life. I think I started working when I was at the age of 12. And that was the first opportunity. I worked at a library. Then I went from working at Tim Hortons to Shoppers and trying to get as much work experience as I could. Where things led me getting into the mortgage industry, I was actually working at TD Bank as a teller for about 3 months. And then I had somebody that I had known that was a mortgage broker, didn't know what a mortgage was, didn't even know what a mortgage broker was. And they had invited me to come and work for them to kind of maybe learn the business, do some sort of fulfillment, state firm as well. Kind of worked there for about a few years, kind of learned the ways about brokering, decided, do I want to get my license? But then I kind of realized, being that young at 18, who's going to really get a mortgage from you, right? So the first thing is learning the business. I thereafter had left that brokerage firm and I ended up working for a subprime lender at that time called Resmore Trust, which is currently known as RMG Mortgages. So I went into fulfillment of underwriting and then kind of just scaled and went into different roles, from being in fulfillment to underwriting to broker development coordinator roles to inside sales to renewals to external sales. And then that transition went from being with MCAP, the parent company, because Resmore had got acquired and they had rebranded as RMG as well. So in total, I was on the corporate lending side for almost about 14 years. Yeah, and that's kind of a bit of background about myself. So as you can see, the work ethics and always go, it has always been a thing of mine.
Yeah, you know what? That's interesting. We've talked about this before, that that axiom, work smart, not hard. I've found that in my own career and speaking to others, that you can't really do that. It's kind of work smart and hard. But what you were talking about a moment ago, when you first joined a brokerage, and you were young and didn't know how anybody would, I guess, respect you as a mortgage agent at the time. How did you overcome that? Or what strategy did you use? Maybe for agents that aren't necessarily that young, but they're new to the industry, and you got a real estate agent saying, "Hey, you've been in the industry 5 minutes. Why would I deal with you?"
Mm-hmm. I think for me, it was more of putting my ego aside and saying, what do I need to do to get there? And the initial thing for me was learn as much about the business as I could, and getting myself to a comfort level, but having obviously right coaches and mentors and a support system of brokers or agents that are willing to kind of guide you through each of those steps. That's obviously very key. And that was how I kind of overcame it. But then I said, there's more to the business, just brokering, and that led to the lending side. Obviously, now being back on the broker side, you come back with all this knowledge, all this experience. You get to also being in the business development role. I got to experience different types of brokerages, different types of personalities, business models,
right?
And kind of leveraging off that where I am today to say, this is the type of brokerage that I kind of want to overtake, and kind of things that I want to change that I think would work based on all of that history and past there that I've learned.
Yep. Sorry, Kane, just one follow-up to that. If you had a new agent starting with you now, you having the experience that you didn't have then and you have now, what would you suggest to that agent? Would it be along the lines of, you don't have the experience or the knowledge, but kind of rely on me type thing? Would you say that a new agent should rely on somebody as experienced as yourself?
I think that plays one part. I think a lot of this business also comes down to a lot of self-learning. I used to be that guy when I was younger. I used to Google everything. I would sit down with different underwriters, sit down with different agents and say, just let me sit beside you, and I want to see what you're doing from a process standpoint. And I would just ask them questions. At the end of the day, how was I going to learn if I wasn't investing my time on about the business, but then walking through what is the entire process? Because doing mortgages is not just about sales, all the steps from A to Z on, getting it from the beginning to getting it closed, right? And also dealing with the lenders and all of that. So if for any agents that I have that typically are more fresh and new that I bring on board, they go through extensive training. But the most important thing for me is having a business plan before anything. So I don't start anything until they have a business plan. However, as part of my brokerage here, we actually provide them a template, a business plan, and then we kind of review it together and we determine what is the next steps. Are they going to be a potential good fit or are they not? So that kind of allows me to kind of work with them. And then from there, we take on the onboarding process, and then we have about a 3-month training period where it's just learning about the lenders and all of that before they actually start going out there. Because at the end of the day, you need to know the basic, take the course, that's number one, but then understanding how the lenders operate, how the business operates, and the processes and the systems before you can actually go out there and start speaking to clients or referral partners.
Excellent points.
And just on that, Patrick, I'm curious, is there anything that you've identified, either characteristics or a certain category of people that tend to do better coming into the industry? Maybe it's bankers, or maybe it's people that had marketing and sales background, or we hear a lot of people in service industry come over. Is there anything that you've identified specifically about a group of people that you're seeing that they're doing maybe especially well?
Yeah. I would say the most individuals that I see that become the most successful are usually the ones that have a little bit of financial background. So coming from the big banks is also always a good opportunity because they already have that knowledge of what a mortgage is. And then just all they really have to do now is learn about the different lending institutions and the complexities and how it is being on the broker side and going out there looking for business. Because sometimes when you're obviously at the bank is kind of either giving you the leads or they're partnering you up with other individuals, but you still have to find your own business. I think on the brokering end of things, it's 100% of us going out there networking all the time. I look for characteristics of how ambitious are they and how driven are they? And that all starts, again, going back to the business plan. Because if you're willing to start with that business plan, that shows me that you're actually interested in investing into your business and also becoming an entrepreneur. But if you said, it's too much and I don't want to do this and I don't have time, then that's something that I might say, okay, maybe this may not be the right fit for me, right? Because at the end of the day, I look for those that are newer to the industry. I'm going to be investing into you a lot of my time. I know there's many brokerages out there that have different models, and obviously some of the biggest mistakes that we see sometimes is people chase the splits over the support and mentorship. I think for me, it's being a great, not just a coach, but being able to mentor them, because I know how it feels having been them at one point and stepping into a different territory and sometimes a different industry that you have no idea what it's about.
I guess just along that same thought, for those that are considering coming into this industry, after they get past those initial hurdles, doing the business plan and getting licensed, what does a typical day look like? What are the activities for those that are typically more successful?
Yeah. I would say having a list of a center of influence of individuals. That's usually where I start. And those that actually are willing to go out there and make those those phone calls or meeting up with those individuals. So even with agents, for me, they come up with a list of at least 25 to 30 individuals on their center of influence, and then we start to tackle them. So I say, okay, maybe per day, you should be calling at least 5 of those individuals. But it's not just speaking with that individual, but it's like also asking, who do they know? How do you expand beyond that network, right? So one of the key things that we always learn from a sales standpoint is obviously your network. Your network is your net worth, right? But yeah, I would say from there, if I look at it, if they're not able to make those conversations or they're uncomfortable, let's say, with confidence because maybe they don't know a lot about mortgages, then that might be a time where I might invest a little bit more time with them, and we'll do some role playing. How do you have that conversation? How do you engage somebody at a network event? Or how do you approach a realtor? Because you never want to go and say, hey, do you want to do business? That's not how networking works. Yeah. Right? It starts with being a bit more personal, whether it's meeting up 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. But I think it's knowing if the agent has that ability to be persistent and the constant follow-up. That's part of, I think that's part of the mortgage game as mortgage brokers. It's making sure that you're able to maintain that good working relationship amongst your referral partners.
I got a question for you. In talking about networking, do you have a good icebreaker? If you're at a networking event and you're going up to someone, do you have a good icebreaker? Because I always like to ask that question because just to give you some context, Kane and I were in a Tim Hortons once, and I used to use this when I was teaching at Seneca, how a natural icebreaker. We were in line. There was a girl standing in front of us, and he just walked past me and went up to her and he said, hey, that's a nice dress. Next thing I know, they were having a conversation. Very easy, very natural. And I always remember that because I think most people think that it's very difficult to start a conversation. Do you have anything like that? Like you walk up to somebody at a networking events and say, hey, nice dress. Or maybe not that.
Network events, I look at the room. I kind of gauge the room to kind of see who's in conversations of 3 groups, who's in conversations of 4 groups, because the ones in the 3 groups, you might have the opportunity to kind of go in there, kind of introduce yourself. Sometimes it's just a simple, hey, how's it going? Are you enjoying the event? Mm-hmm. Right? What do you get so far about the events? What did you think about that speaker? And that's the whole point about these networking events is that you're supposed to go out there and make yourself uncomfortable and have just these simple little questions that you can just ask somebody. But that's one thing I always look at is the groups of 3, because that's an opportunity for you to have a conversation with the odd person out. Yeah, you can compliment one another. I've had it happen to me where somebody might say, and I'm like, oh, thanks. And that's how you have a conversation. Or, I sometimes will just say, hey, what brings you to the event today?
Just want to clarify the compliment strategy in case my wife ends up hearing this, that was previous to when I met her.
Yeah.
But
it was actually yesterday, Patrick. No.
That's we find that strategy works very well for us at events as well. That question, what are you hoping to get out of this event? as like an icebreaker. And typically we find that that's will give us some information about them, maybe even in relation to how we can help them, right? So it's kind of it does a lot of things, that question there. So I love that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sometimes will say, why do I have to dress up? I said, at the end of the day, you dress to impress. I'm not saying dress to the full 9 yards and wearing a bow tie and all of that, but be presentable, because that's going to also make you approachable. We're in sales, and as a salesperson, you want to feel good knowing that, hey, you know what? I can approach that person, or, you're willing to approach them. But yeah, I'm not saying it's all about that, about the looks and all that, but I say make sure that you're approachable on how you're standing, how you're communicating, and all of that type of stuff. But yeah, there's many different things about sales.
Absolutely. And that really boils down to having a good mentor as well, right? Having somebody when you join a brokerage. So do you have anyone that you remember? You don't have to say names if you don't want to, but do you have anybody that was kind of instrumental or helpful in your career and mentoring you along?
I've had many that have come in and out.
Yeah.
I'm obviously very thankful and grateful for all those coaches and the mentors. I've had many at my previous employer with MCAP, right? I had the ability to not just be coached by anybody, but it was from executives and people who had specialized in coaching. And sometimes we did offside coaching with other coaches that they brought out from as third parties. So, being able to kind of have that opportunity, because not many companies provide that. That's something that really helped me elevate my confidence. I think some people might look at me and just say sometimes, so Pat is great at talking with people and he's great at sales. But a lot of people don't know is that when I first got into the industry, I was very shy. I didn't have much of a voice. I didn't want to talk. I just came in and did my job. And, people would always say, you have all ththese great ideas and you're not willing to voice them. And they sometimes would put me on the spot, me from being uncomfortable to being comfortable. And then, I think getting any sort of sales experience that you can get, especially when it allows you the ability to teach you about negotiations, that's a great thing. But yeah, I wouldn't have been, honestly, if I wouldn't have been the salesperson that I was if I didn't have a lot of the mentors that I did at my previous employer.
Winding a little bit from when you did first start, or even before you first started, and now looking back, is there anything about this industry that surprised you that you sort of didn't expect, or that maybe was more difficult than you thought?
That's a good question. I think for myself, I didn't realize, one, how resilient I was, but I also didn't realize how resilient the industry was. And you kind of get to learn over time, because those that push back and choose not to change and evolve with the way the economy is, or the market is, or the way the industry changes, there's going to be a setback for them, right? So it's more about either embracing these potential or these negative changes and seeing the positive in them, and knowing how to pivot your business, right? We all saw with the regulator changes from 2016 to 2018, even the credit crisis in 2008, there's still a whole bunch of many senior brokers out there. There's something that people are doing right, but they're adapting to it. The industry has obviously evolved in many ways. I think technology, that's been a big thing. Artificial intelligence, automation. I think branding awareness, social media, right? When I got into the industry, Instagram didn't exist. Facebook didn't really exist at that time. So having those platforms is a great outlet to get the word out and to provide education. And keep in mind, obviously, nowadays, consumers and clients, they have so much access to information. Now, if they're always listening to the news, that's one thing, still speak to a more professional, somebody who specializes in it.
And I guess on that same line of thinking, how do you think that the role is going to evolve over the next several years with the emergence of these different technologies?
Yeah, I think with technology advancing and artificial intelligence, I think it's going to allow agents and mortgage agents and brokers to actually go out there and really focus on the sales and the relationship of those clients or referral partners that they're dealing with, because all that stuff is going to be taken care of, right? And that's going to change over time. I think that's what I would say. I do also think that maybe some regulations might become a bit more tighter. Obviously, we see it now in the private lending space, but only time will tell. I'm always
thinking that the human element might become even more important, given that a lot of the automation can happen on the back end.
Yes, as human beings, we got to fight harder, right? The more advanced technology is, and if you're not adapting to, what's out there, you're just going to be left behind.
Yeah, fascinating point. So, what would you, if you were just starting off in this industry now, what would you suggest to someone? Because it can be a very lonely industry. We know that sales environments, when you are trying to build your own book, you're kind of considered to be self-employed, that it can be very lonely. What would you suggest to overcome that and start to build your network?
Yeah, I would say from building your network, the best thing that most people can do is finding a group of other mortgage brokers that are either at the same level so that you guys are challenging one another. Going out together with network events, attending trade shows, attending any sort of seminars, speaking with some experienced real estate agents, investors. I think you've got to look beyond sometimes just realtors, and that's obviously the biggest, I think, some misconceptions that people think the business is all about realtors. And I say, this is a time for you to look at your friends, your family. You can look at, anybody that you know or their friends. There's so many people that you can engage with. And I think having the right mentor to get you there and pushing you, right? I think that's one thing I've always seen is sometimes there is, I don't want to say a lack of leadership, but I would say there is probably a lack of mentorship.
So do you think that when somebody's considering joining a brokerage, they should be kind of interviewing the broker as well and trying to get a handle on who they're going to be working with, or if they're compatible?
100%. I would always say, always interview the broker and also the brokerage, and go beyond that and ask, who are your top performers within your brokerage that I can speak to? That will speak either on the culture of the brokerage, the training process, and all of that. That's always very key, right? I think if you're not interviewing, there's recruiters that are out there, but they're also not the ones who might be leading the person. So the question is, are you going to actually have the ability to speak to the person that you're going to be leading to before you actually enter into an agreement? And how much time are they willing to invest into you, right? So I think even for me, as a leader, I give all my agents the opportunity of coaching once a week if they choose to, right? The more experienced ones, maybe not so much. They come to me when they need me for, an escalation, right. But the relatively newer ones, I spend more time with them. And we kind of talk about skill sets. So we don't just talk about how to get business, but what are you lacking? Are you lacking confidence? Is it your presentation skills? Is it the knowledge aspect of things? And where do we find these tools and resources for them? Understanding processes. So, I always have a rule for even new agents, their first 5 deals, I have to review them and guide them through. Yeah. Right? They kind of navigate and say, this is why you're doing this, and making sure that they understand why we're doing it. Because there's a lot. It's one thing to take obviously the REMIC course, very complex. There's much more to it. It's not just lenders. You have to still follow regulations and, understanding what's going on in the market of government and Bank of Canada and how that all works. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have those conversations with the clients.
And Patrick, you mentioned earlier misconceptions. Are there any, you think, misconceptions from either from the public or for those coming into the industry about brokers, about the role?
Yeah, I would say probably one misconception is that brokers only deal with those with bad credit. That's obviously not the case, right? We're not just an alternative beyond the banks, but we're providing a more holistic overview of their finances and determining what's going to be the best mortgage product for them, not who is the best mortgage lender for them, right? Because every lender can have 3 or 5 different products out there. And I think it's sometimes the other misconception I would say is that mortgage brokers charge fees. We know that's obviously not always the case. Obviously, more deals like privates and stuff, yes, those come into place. But from the aid lending standpoint, especially competing with the traditional banks, really nobody should be charging a fee. right? Another misconception I would probably say is, I think the sense of flexibility. Some people think that they can just do whatever they want when they get into the mortgage space, but that takes time, right? You have to first invest into your business, and that's typically your first year, maybe your second year, before things get better. Because your first year is learning and strategizing and focusing on that business plan. And then from there, it can get easier as the volumes come in, and you learn more while you get the leads coming in that you're dealing with.
Yeah, it's interesting because the truth is you can be your own boss, but at the end of the day, you have to question yourself, what type of boss do you want to be? Like if you were hiring someone, what would you want them to do during the day? And then look in the mirror and say, am I doing what I would expect someone else to be doing who worked for me? And that's that self-discipline that's difficult to pin down, when, especially I'd imagine when you have somebody sitting across from you who wants to get into the industry. It's difficult to determine how much self-discipline they have and therefore how successful they might be, because they might be a genius when it comes to doing a mortgage or on the back end of things, but there's that outward side. And with that in mind, when you mentioned about overcoming that fear of talking to people, how did you do that? Like when you say you were shy when you first came into the industry, how did you get over that?
You just wing it. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes you have no idea whether the conversation is going to be good or if it's not. Sometimes they might be pissed off by something you said, and they might not, right? I think at the end of the day, you're not going to know unless you actually go out there and try. And it's not about being perfect in that initial conversation. One of my agents, a couple of my agents, I always tell them, when you're dealing, especially even with a realtor that might be new or somebody that's newer to the industry, you're both in the same level of learning. So you guys can make mistakes together, but you can build your relationship together. So as you're both growing, guess what? There's more value towards that relationship because you guys got to see each other from down to where you guys are today, right? But yeah, I think it's going to require a lot of rejection. There's, I always tell agents nowadays, I said, one of the best things that could ever happen to me when it comes to networking is when people reject me. Because I don't dwell too much on it, I go on to the next person. There's a lot of people out there and a lot of business that can be done. I said, so don't focus so much as to why this one person didn't reach back out to you. And sometimes they might say, we're already dealing with other top brokers. There's different ways of positioning that, right? Whether it is saying, what's the harm of having another mortgage broker? Because not all mortgage brokers are diverse in everything, right? Some only specialize in A business, some B, some commercial, some private only. For myself, I pride myself in making sure that I'm diverse in all so that I can try to assist them, or I have members on my team that either specialize in private only or commercial, so at least this way we're all learning from one another.
It sounds like resilience and I guess being comfortable with being uncomfortable is sort of something that you had to learn to adapt to, and that probably a lot of others in the industry have as well. Is there any other, I guess, advice that you would have for someone that is thinking about this career that is considering becoming a mortgage broker, that you would have advice for them?
Yeah, I would make sure that the best advice I could give to somebody is what you're going to put in is what you're going to get out. The only person to blame for you not being successful is going to be yourself. Because as an entrepreneur, we have to wake up every day. We have to plan our day out, whether it's weeks in advance or not. I'm a very task-oriented person, and I can't do things without things being my calendar, whether it's personal or business. But you have to be able to provide, create a schedule for yourself. Because again, going back to Joe's comment earlier, discipline, right? How are you going to discipline yourself if you have no sense of direction of what you want to do? The industry is a great industry to get in. There's that one hurdle of just learning. And, I think anybody who is interested in wanting to become a mortgage agent, speak to other mortgage brokers, speak to other networks, speak to other mortgage brokerages, speak to somebody like Joe or even yourself, Kane, right? We obviously, as we teach at Remic as well, there's an opportunity for everybody's opinions and what their perception is and thoughts are about the industry. Speak to even realtors. What's their experience like dealing with mortgage brokers? Yeah, to kind of get a guide. Is this something you want to really invest into? Another advice I would say is, I think statistically we know that mortgage relatively new agents take about anywhere from 3 to 6 months sometimes to get their first deal. Plan ahead of time. Don't just give a business plan, but plan like your processes, what your operations, and figuring that out as well. What your marketing strategy is going to be like. How much is that going to cost? I think budgeting obviously requires making sure you have a business line of credit available or a personal line of credit available. Because guess what? You may not have any cash flow coming in for those first 6 months. So just plan as much as you can. It's going to change. Your business is going to change, and you're going to learn certain things that either work for you and don't. And there's going to be times where you've wasted money on certain things.
What about for someone who's been in the industry for about 6 months or 7 months and is feeling that, I can't do this. Every time I have a client, I can't get them approved, or if I get them approved and they don't want the deal. So I'm thinking maybe this isn't for me. What do you have in regards to, because it's a good word these days, resilience. How might you coach them if they're feeling that way?
Yeah. I think for me, it would be more about what triggers them to make them uncomfortable, right? Is it maybe history in the past? And sometimes it can get personal, right? I think when you're coaching or mentoring, you're really getting to know the person on a more personal level. It doesn't always have to start off on a business aspect. And that's what I try to do with any agents, is trying to say, okay, tell me a little bit about your background. How were you as a kid and what was life like for you? Because the way I see it, anybody who was part of my team, I want them to feel like this is home and like it's family, right? Making sure that they're comfortable with it so that I know how to navigate with them from a professional standpoint if they're having any challenges. And this is how we're going to overcome it, either through role playing, or you're going to either come out with myself, or I would recommend going out with one of our other agents to a trade show or to a lender network. You can also do shadowing with them and see how they have those conversations. There's a lot of support in the industry, a lot of brokers. There's a lot of mortgage broker events that you can create your own separate groups together, whether it's like a weekly planning session together that everybody says, what are the challenges everybody's going through, and how can we work together as a team to get to out there?
That's an amazing point, because as you know, ideas don't occur in a vacuum. You have to have other people's thoughts on something, and brainstorming. It's difficult to brainstorm on your own. You need others' input to help create an idea, and that's such a good point. So if somebody's having trouble if somebody's an agent now watching this podcast and they're having trouble, maybe one of the best pieces of advice that we could provide is go talk to somebody at their brokerage, sit down, try to reset, have a coffee with them, go out, spend some time, see where you're coming from, what you've been doing, and have somebody like yourself to talk to who has an active interest in knowing who you are and can give you some advice, right? It is, as you were mentioning before about the technology, and Kane mentioned, I think so aptly, that it's probably never been as important before to have personal relationships, especially when you can see ChatGPT or Bard can write out an intro or write out, stuff like that. But the human interaction, that authenticity is really important.
That is a nice thing about this industry. You might think as an outsider that it's closed and there's a lot of competition and but there is, but it seems to be very open in that you reach out to someone and they want to talk, they want to help. So it's a lovely industry that way. Have you found that to be the case, Patrick? And has that always been like that for you, or has it grown over time?
I think it all really relatively depends. I think initially when I first started, everything was very professional, very business all the time. It took me a while to kind of say, okay, where does my authenticity come into place in my conversations, in my relationships, right? the more personal you can be with your referral partners or with your clients, the more open they're going to be able to want to do business with you. And that's what I had learned. It took time. Initially, it was just, let's just start getting directly to business. But then it was just a transaction, right? And I think when we look at clients and referral partners, this is like a lifelong partnership. As long as you're in the business, right? Obviously, I want, my clients to refer back business and say this person they're great because they really care about you. They really ask you, things that are on a more personal level, because some of those things do matter to them. Even though, some agents will say, why do I need to ask all these personal questions? Mm-hmm. I said, because if somebody's getting separated or divorced, or they said that, they have 3 kids, there's information that you're gathering from it to understand, hey, but if you're just going out there and just asking them, they're going to feel like you genuinely don't care about them.
Yeah, that's a great point. You've taken an active interest in their life. I think when people start to do that, they actually find that the job isn't necessarily a job anymore. It's more of a passion and a great career, because everybody has a story, and everybody's story is slightly different. And finding that story out is a way that you can make a new friend, if not just a new client, right? So that's very insightful.
Yeah, and nothing stops at one conversation, right? I think I always look at it, if you're building a network, keep in mind, it's not just the first time and all of a sudden expect them to send you business.
Right.
Especially, right? That takes time. And if that means takes time, I don't mean overnight. I mean, sometimes it can take 3-4 meetings. Sometimes it can take a month. Sometimes it takes 6 months just to have somebody say, okay, you know what? You've been engaging with me so many times. I really like you. I think now I trust you enough that we're going to do some business together. Or when their deal is not working out for them with one of their clients and they were dealing with another mortgage broker, you might be that solution to them, right?
Yeah.
I guess along those lines, just curious, Patrick, is there anything that comes to mind, any hard lessons that you learned, maybe especially early on, that those joining could also learn from?
Yeah. I would say the hardest lesson for me, keep in mind, when I left my corporate job and went back into the broker space, I was coming in during a downturn of a market, right? I also came into this industry in 2008 during a credit crisis. So that's not just one time, that's 2 times I've changed, doing something completely different and living with the uncertainty of it. I would say now, going back into the broker space a couple of years ago, lead generation was not what I expected it to be. My biggest downfall was investing too much money into it. If you're somebody who's solo and you're starting off, it's one thing. But if you're, you've built a business already and then you decide, okay, now we're going to spend some money on Google ads and all that stuff costs money. The Facebook stuff might cost less, but your conversion is going to be very small. Right. So that was probably my biggest mistake, spending too much money on lead generation and maybe I did it for about, say, 8 months, qualified lead.
Oh, wow.
But, I think I can call and call and call, but, I think the landing pages or the pre-screening aspect with some of these companies is always not what you expect it to be. And in a downturn market, in my personal opinion, I don't believe lead generation works. When interest rates were relatively very low, 100% that can definitely work because everybody's shopping for the rate. And in the downturn market, everybody's looking for financial advice or mortgage advice, right? So
now, what would you have done? So those dollars that went into, you're talking about digital marketing, where would you have changed? What would you have changed?
I probably would have spent more time out there networking, because when going into for myself, when I had gone back to the broker side, I was trying to do too many things at once. I was doing the lead generation, networking, making phone calls, working day and night, but also doing social media, right? I was creating my own videos, editing my own content, branding myself, creating my own logos, creating my own website. If you're somebody who's trying to learn all about the business, that's one thing, but it's another thing to kind of outsource that, because outsourcing obviously costs money. And, I think if you're a newer agent, you're trying to say, how do I save money? And I think that's, for me, it was figuring out, okay, lead generation is not working for me. I could have social media requires a lot of time into it. It can be great if you're out there, and you're willing to invest into the editing and all of that, and that's your kind of niche. But what I found for myself was networking, building those relationships, being in constant contact with people outside of even real estate, people that I've even worked with in the past, ex-colleagues at different companies. Sometimes they can be your biggest clientele, right? So there's already that trust aspect. And I tell that to the agents, even if you're a full-time working somewhere else and now you're a part-time mortgage agent, leverage off the people that you work with right now. Yeah. So
that's a fascinating point, because you look at the insurance industry and it seems like a lot of insurance brokerages, when somebody comes on, the first thing they try to teach them is go to the people and hone your skills on them, maybe get some business from them. And that's one more question for you. If you have a new agent, they obviously are going to find it difficult to get business from their family, because nobody wants to talk about their own personal, issues that they may have. So would you say that it would be beneficial for an agent like that to maybe speak to their family members and then say, I've got someone who's very experienced, like Patrick at my brokerage. He'll take care of you, and I just want to present that to you. Would that be a good strategy?
That is a great strategy as well, because I tell agents sometimes your family and your friends may not be comfortable disclosing their credit and their income, right? So if you have somebody that's more experienced and work together as a team and say that I'm part of a brokerage that comes with, let's say, a combined of 50 years of mortgage experience, that might build a bit more confidence with them, right? And it's just, I think, as a newer agent, when you're getting that direction, see it as a training opportunity, because you're going to be shadowing somebody who's more experienced and senior to kind of help you, guide you through that. And it makes you look good, because they can say, wow, you're part of a great brokerage. And then next time they'll say, hey, now that you have that experience, maybe I'll deal with you when my mortgage comes up for renewal. So looking at things not just at a current state, but also that future opportunity. Even if you're approaching, your friends and family, and some people might get comfortable with it, don't stop just thinking that they're going to think about what's the opportunity and who do they know.
Right.
They give me 5 people that you think that I could benefit from if I can reach out, and if you're okay with it, or send me a formal introduction to connect with that person. Now you're creating more and more people part of your book of business or potential leads that you can deal with in the future, and start adding people with email, so you can start emailing them, doing mass emails or communication with their consent, of course, but you just never know what to expect, right? Sometimes people will surprise you and who's willing to help you and who's also not. But just don't stop at focus on one group of people, but try to think beyond outside of that. Even if you're at the bank, you can partner up with people at the banks. If the deals don't work at the banks, guess what? They might send you that lead. Right?
Absolutely. Now, Patrick, we're talking about people at the beginning of their career. You are probably, you're a young guy. You're probably the middle of your career, maybe thereabouts. So you have a lot of highway ahead of you. Where do you see yourself going, and where do you see your passion for the next several years?
That's a good question. I try not to think so far out, because a lot has happened. It's also such a short period of time. I went from being I went to two other brokerages before I oversaw as principal broker, and that all happened in a span about 2.5 years, right? So having one, I think for me, where I see myself is scaling the brokerage over time, creating other team leads likely, and teaching them how to lead, and creating new entrepreneurs as mortgage agents and brokers. Even with Integrity, we have an accounting and also an insurance division as well. Mm-hmm. So that kind of helps. We can obviously kind of expand and scale from there. But 5 years from now, I think it's just likely continuing what I'm doing, as long as I love leading people, right? And I think that's always been a huge thing in educating. And as you guys know, I think education and teaching mortgage agents, brokers has always been something that's been part of my core since I got into this industry.
Well,
is there anything else?
Wonderful at giving back to the industry.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Is there anything else, Patrick, you want to leave with our listeners before we end this one?
Yeah, I would say for the listeners, if you're a mortgage agent, just do as many interviews as you can with other brokerages. Don't just stop at one, and always try to see if there's an opportunity for you to speak to the person who's going to lead you. I think for anybody else outside of mortgage agents, consumers, interview your mortgage broker. They play a key role. Understand what their experience is like. What type of options and lenders they're also dealing with, and so forth. That's would be my last final advice there. But yeah,
that's excellent. Thank you so much, Patrick. Oh, and where can people find you online?
Yeah, people can either find me on LinkedIn under Patrick Soy, on Instagram at Pat Soy Mortgage, or you can check out the Remic website. I believe I'm on there as well. Yeah. Or you can simply just Google Patrick Soy Mortgage, and that will bring up most of my social media stuff. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you both for the opportunity. Very much appreciated.
Thank you,
Patrick. You're amazing. We love having you. You know what? I want to at some point in the future talk to you about the insurance side that you have, and then also commercial mortgages as well. So we look forward to chatting with you again.
Most definitely. Thanks, Joe. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to the $1 Billion Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode.
For more in-depth entrepreneurial insights, follow us on social media, and for more info on the show, go to billiondollarpodcast.com.
See you next time.